I'm actually going to be heading up the what's called the Mosquito Control Division for Miami-Dade County in Florida. So it's a big job. It's a challenge. There's no doubt about that. It's a big challenge, but it's an opportunity as well. What's happening is that Miami-Dade County have recognized the need to revamp their program. They're not making any pretense about that. They have a program currently, but particularly in the light of last year's Zika outbreak and the consequences thereafter, what they're doing actually is rebuilding the program. And the main thing and the exciting part to me is that they're hiring 42 new staff. So it will be 59 staff altogether, including myself. And they're increasing the budget, they're improving the facilities, they're buying new equipment, and so they need someone to head this up and put it all together and form a team and then make a plan going forward. As for the Zika outbreak last year, it was quite high numbers. It was very difficult for them to control it, and CDC issued a travel advisory alert, especially for pregnant women or women who are thinking of becoming pregnant. A very serious disease. So it really caused a public health emergency is what occurred. And that's clearly something they want to avoid in the future. Now, part of the problem, of course, is that you can't stop Zika or chikungunya or dengue or yellow fever for that matter. You can't stop them coming in, just the same as we can't stop them coming into the Cayman Islands. Miami has a much more difficult task because of Miami International Airport, because of the influx of people from all around the region and internationally. So it is a concern and it is a challenge, but certainly the Miami-Dade County do not want to see a repeat of what happened with Zika. I'm a mosquito biologist originally, but I've been working in mosquito control for almost 33 years and working in it at various different aspects. The Jiggly scheme was that you started at the bottom and you did all the different kinds of jobs, which seemed very onerous at the time, but with hindsight, of course, was extremely valuable. You learn from the ground up. So there's that aspect. And then also through various dengue outbreaks and then chikungunya and Zika, we have learned here. It was a learning experience. It's all very well learning the academics at university, but to deal with it on a practical basis, of course, is different. And it all has to be done very, very quickly. So, you learn as you go. So it's that, over the years, that experience and the management. I mean, that is key, the management. Obviously, there's also politics to deal with and budget, which may not always be the most fun part of the job, but the necessary part too. But I think really what I would stress is the aspect of building a team. That's been the key at MRCU. That is the key at MRCU. It's the team. It's working with a really good bunch of people who are motivated and conscientious and work together as a team. So that needs management, and it's that set of skills, I think, with the experience over the years that taken to Miami-Dade to and I've given my view already that the key aspect to all of that is building a team of good people who want to do a good job and are motivated to do a good job. I arrived in 1984, the year that the late Dr. Giglioli died, actually. The mosquito situation was, to all intents and purposes, historically, was already under control. Although I didn't think so when I first arrived. I couldn't believe the number of mosquitoes. I couldn't believe how people could put up with that. But you know, I quickly learned that in years gone by, it had been much, much worse. And this was the success of Giglioli and what he put in place, and how he was able to achieve what he did, and all the various different things that he did, which is not just mosquito control. But the mosquito situation was still, you know, the numbers were still fairly high at that time. The years following that, one of the biggest changes, which I do believe Giglioli would have gone along with, because he pioneered all kinds of practical control work. But one of the biggest changes has been the switch from conventional spraying to the use of solid formulations, the pellets and granules that we apply from the aircraft and ground equipment. So that's been probably the biggest technical difference. And then in more recent years, although mosquito-borne disease was an issue, it wasn't at the forefront. And Dr. Giglioli he did work as a consultant for various different jurisdictions in the region during dengue epidemics in the 70s. But in more recent years, we've seen repeated cycles of dengue, and we've had chikungunya and Zika, and there's concern about possible other viruses, and also dengue is not going away. So this definitely has been more of a switch towards disease prevention, although the economic control is still the mainstay of what we do here in Cayman. The swamp mosquito is the main pest, followed by the pasture land, the grassland mosquitoes, the big black ones that love to pounce on you as you're walking through grass fields. Well, it's two things. It's quality of life. I don't think the word pest properly describes these mosquitoes when they come out in huge numbers, as they do with a synchronous emergence, as we call it. So it's quality of life aspect. And if anyone thinks it doesn't affect quality of life, just talk to older Caymanians about what the mosquitoes are like, you know, not that many years ago. But economic control, of course, because of the effect on the tourist economy. Visitors, tourists are they don't want to come here and be bitten by mosquitoes. So it does affect the economy. Well, I mean, going back to Giglioli days, the government of the day recognized that if Cayman were to become a tourist destination and a financial center, which I think was the genius of those guys back in those days, that in order to do either, attract the financial center to come here, they had to get the mosquito populations under control. He actually started up the government, and Dr. G started up MRCU in November 1965 and began operations in 1966. Dr. Giglioli was, or certainly became, a world-renowned scientist and entomologist. He was old school entomologist. He had worked in different parts of Africa, not in mosquito control per se, but mosquito biology. But he knew about mosquito control. His father was a malaria expert, a malariologist. In Guyana, his father was credited with really improving the malaria situation in Guyana. So he was very well versed in all of this. And his philosophy was that this has to be science-based. It has to be science-based. And also, I think a very important point for Cayman is that he he termed the agency the Mosquito Research and Control Unit. It had to be both as far as he was concerned. And I do believe he was correct in that philosophy, and that was part of the reason for his success. It was Jake Lully who made MRCU a regional center of excellence. He deserves the credit for that. The rest of us have been fortunate to inherit that legacy. I should mention that he was also very broad in his scientific endeavors. He introduced a lot of geological studies to Cayman, liaising with the University of Alberta in Canada. He was very interested in conservation, especially conservation of the wetlands. He introduced a study onto the North Sound, which hadn't been done before. He instigated what was called the Natural Resources Laboratory as far back as 1974, and through different manifestations that has grown to become the Department of Environment today, which I think he would be very proud of. So there's a whole range of things there. As far as the mosquito control is concerned, other jurisdictions in the region quickly got to know of and realize that this was a successful program being conducted here, and looked at what he was doing, what MRCU was doing, and how they were going about it. And I think the fact that it was science-based and that he was perfectly happy to use advice and assistance from wherever it was needed. He brought in the early days, Dr. Jigley brought in entomologists from Jamaica, where there was expertise on mosquito identification. We didn't even know which mosquitoes were here and which were present, what species they were, and what sort of numbers they were in. So all that had to be done initially. And a lot of the control techniques were borrowed from Florida and adapted to suit Cayman. Well, I know that Jamaica is in process of forming their own equivalent to an MRCU, and I believe the British Virgin Islands are also interested. To my knowledge, what these jurisdictions have is that they have very good people, they have very good personnel, good academic background, and they have so they have the expertise. I think what they've been lacking is the fundamental resources of finances. But my understanding is that many of these jurisdictions now are attempting to build up their own mosquito control agencies. Also, I should mention one of the things here that I think is valuable to other jurisdictions to know is that MRCU is a separate independent agency. So we don't really come under public works or public health, or environmental health is also separate here in Cayman. So that has been, that's also been something I think that's been a big advantage to Cayman over the years. I think I think technically one of the things, as I mentioned earlier, is the use of solid formulations of insecticide. They're safer, they're more efficient, they're more effective, they're preventative rather than reactive. That's an important change technically. The increase in need for disease prevention has been probably the biggest and most important change in recent years. Well, one of the first things they did was the use of fogging trucks. Well, they were little mini mokes in those days. And it was almost like blowing against thunder. But that was one of the first things, was chemical control. But he also borrowed techniques from Florida in physical control, changing the water dynamics in the mangrove swamps, and spent several years constructing canals through the mangroves in order to partly to drain the swamps, but also to flush and alter the water dynamics in the mangroves, where most of the mosquitoes were breeding. So that was one of the early things that was done. And then aerial mosquito control was introduced by 1970, 71. And once that began, along with the increase in fogging trucks, with the aerial treatments, then you really began to see a decline in the mosquito numbers. But also, he was very, very insistent on the scientific aspect, the monitoring, trapping. He set up a mosquito trapping network, which we still use today. Otherwise, you don't know what you're doing and how you're doing, how well you're doing. And he also introduced original research being done here in Cayman on the Cayman mosquitoes and various different aspects of control. So it was multifaceted and proved to be very successul. Many years ago, we were situated over by the hospital, but subsequently didn't have our own dedicated facility. But then constructing or getting constructed this laboratory and office facility here, which is excellent. Similar building on Cayman Brac, which is also excellent. It's modeled, it's a smaller version of what we have here. And the highlight to me is the aircraft hangar. After our old hangar was severely damaged by Hurricane Ivan, it did take some time, but the political will was there, and eventually the finances were there, so we were able to construct a state-of-the-art aircraft hangar with offices and workshops, and it's all hurricane rated. It's an excellent facility for the aircraft section. The genetically modified technique is a modern version of older sterile insect technique, as it's called. You're using sterile males, or nowadays effectively sterile males, to mate with the wild females and thereby reduce the population. The science behind it nowadays, the genetics and the science behind it is cutting edge. It's very sophisticated science. It's very clever. Which was developed by scientists in Oxford and then eventually the spin-off biotech company Oxitec. So the science behind it is robust, and I and others were very attracted to that aspect of it. I think what's important to note is that going back to 2009 and 2010, we conducted field trials, small scale, not even really pilot studies, but field trials to see if it could be made to work. First of all, to see if the males could survive in the wild, because that's historically had been a problem. And then secondly, once we'd established that, to monitor, make sure that the males were mating with the wild females and thereby reducing the population. So we did establish that some years ago, but the technique is certainly in principle is a very valuable technique. What I should say though is that in control of Aedes aegypti, what needs to be done, and there's general consensus for this, is that you need to use as many different techniques as are available, whether they be older traditional techniques or modern cutting-edge science, such as the genetically modified. There's no one control methodology that's going to control Aedes aegypti. It's a very difficult mosquito to control. So you need to bring together as many different types of control techniques that are applicable and integrate them, and that's the essence of it, is the integration. And because it's an urban problem, because it's an issue associated directly with human beings, you then also have community engagement, and education has to be part of that, which isn't really necessary so much, let's say, for controlling swamp mosquitoes. you can inform people as to what you're doing, but people do not need, the general public doesn't need to do anything about swamp mosquitoes. That's our job. But with Aedes aegypti, the general public can help by keeping their yard clean, and you know, reducing the number of water-containing vessels, any buckets and so on that can contain water. So with Aedes aegypti, as I said, it's as many techniques as you can possibly put together, and the genetically modified technique is a modern aspect of that whole program. With successive introductions of dengue and the outbreak of chikungunya, followed quickly by Zika and the very serious aspects of Zika, combined with the fact that we found out through, confirmed by a PhD project done here at MRCU by Dr. Angela Harris, who's now at CDC, that Aedes aegypti had become resistant to a wide range of chemical insecticides. So that combination of factors meant that we needed to look for other means of control, and we already knew that the genetically modified technique was out there, and we had, as I said, we had conducted field trials to show that it could be made to work. So that was, all of that combined were the main reasons for wanting to introduce a new, an innovative technique against Aedes aegypti. The operational rollout of the genetically modified mosquito program has been done in West Bay. The plan is to roll that out island-wide throughout Grand Cayman over a longer period of time, obviously, but that's the plan going ahead for the future. But it's the application of science and how to improve people's lives, the quality of life, as I mentioned before, is very important thing. But being able to use that knowledge and expertise and the techniques that are available with the support of ministries and you know, successive government administrations to improve the quality of life for people, and do it in a safe and responsible manner, and an open manner as well, I should add. And then, well, the public health imperative is pretty obvious and clear, and is quite essential to protecting everyone who lives here and everyone who comes here. It's the people. It's been working with the people here at MRCU. So we were talking just yesterday about some of them who are not here with us anymore, but we remember them fondly, and the ones that are still here, it's been a great team to work with. That's really the key. But this is bittersweet for me. I've been here almost 33 years at MRCU. I've been the boss for about 20 years. It's been very difficult this past couple of weeks telling the staff, telling people. It's been a bit of a whirlwind, very short notice, so it's been quite emotional, quite difficult. And also, you know, I'm very grateful to Cayman. I've been here more than half my life. I've lived here. It's been a great privilege to work at MRCU and to stay here and work with these guys, all the staff, and also, as I say, to Cayman. I'm very grateful to the life that I've been able to live here and the career that I've had. So it is bittersweet, but I'm also looking forward to the opportunity of Miami-Dade. It's a big job, it's a big challenge. There's no getting away from that. There's going to be difficulties, but as I said, I'm looking forward to that, and I guess the good thing is I'm only an hour away, so I certainly will be keeping in touch and keeping contact, and I'll be, you know, coming back and forward.